But in any event, in the 1990s, a Slovakian doctor goes to this prisoner of war hospital, and it's like, you got a bunch of old guys here who are World War II veterans who, you say have bad PTSD and they can't even identify themselves. But he hears this guy muttering in Hungarian, and the guy speaks Hungarian. So he says to him, like, what are you doing here? And the guy's like, oh my God, finally someone's asking me. I mean, which is like just mind blowing, right? I mean,
Oh my God. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of WTF History. I'm really looking forward to this one. I'm glad everybody's back. And thank you all those of you who have subscribed. I think we're over 70,000 subscribers now. We couldn't do it without people like you checking us out. Would love comments on everything we do. What I like is when people point out that we're wrong. So I would appreciate that. If you can see anything we do that's wrong, let us know, man.
I just like when people comment. Some of our episodes, like particularly the one about the time when the U.S. government actually sent out the army to fight veterans. That one has a lot of comments, and I value all the input that we get.
So please subscribe, comment. Really appreciate it. So what do you got today, Mike? You're going to be the one leading it off.
Well, so here at WTF History, we really value the input that we get from our viewers. We like to know what you like to hear about. And some of our most popular episodes that we've done have been vignettes that you did, David, on the longest standing holdout from World War II. This was a Japanese soldier who was commanded by his commanding officer to stay on an island and don't come back until ordered to do so. And the guy stayed there for decades, which was amazing. Another very popular episode is one that I did on a Roman unit, a Roman legion that existed in some form with pure continuity for, almost 1,000 years, right?
That's good.
These were very, very popular episodes. And what I'm going to talk about today is the longest held prisoner of war from World War II, possibly the longest held prisoner of war ever. Most of our viewers are familiar with the premise of the Rambo movies. In the Rambo movies, and particularly for a lot of families grieving after the Vietnam War, there was a question mark, which is it possible that some of our boys, some of our soldiers are still being held somewhere in Southeast Asia? And that was the premise of the Rambo movie. And for the longest time, people who, flew the POW MIA flag we're wondering, is it possible that some of our loved ones are still being held captive up there? So, David, I don't know if you know about this story. I don't know if you do, but I guess I'll say don't ruin it. But just if you don't know, take a guess, which is, when was the last prisoner of war from World War II released from captivity?
1975.
Amazing guess. Most of you know out there that the major tranche, the biggest cohort of POWs were released in 1955. 1975 is not a bad guess, but the number begins with a 2. The last prisoner of war, World War II, was released in the year 2000.
Wow.
This is the amazing story of Andreas Toma, and he was held in Russia until the year 2000. And not because it was perceived that he had committed a war crime or anything like this. It was just a freak story. So Andreas Toma was born in 1925, and he was drafted when he was 19 years old into the Hungarian army. Hungary at the time was fighting on the side of the Axis. It was fighting on the German side of the war. And Andreas Toma saw really, really, really awful action in Poland. So the Russians were trying to get to Berlin. The Germans and the Hungarians and the Romanians were trying to hold them back. And Andreas Toma saw action in what is now Poland. It was really, really, really bad combat. And he suffered from what we would now call PTSD. But in any event, he was taken prisoner by the Russians, and he was, put in with all these other prisoners of war, Germans, Ukrainians, some Russians who had fought for Germany, Hungarians, Romanians, some Italians, so on and so forth. So he's put in a prisoner of war camp in Leningrad in Russia. And, at some point the doctor's like, wow, he's really got a bad case of PTSD, but, let's treat him. And treat him they did. In 1955, as I already said, Russia finally released many of the German POWs. They had been held for well over 10 years, and they were finally allowed to go home. And in many cases, the conditions they were held were horrific. It's estimated that about 5% of those taken prisoner of war by the Russians survived. So that's who was released in 1955. And it's really interesting because after 1955, many of the countries who had had their soldiers being taken prisoner of war in Russia, after that point, you could have them declared legally dead. It's like, you know what? If they haven't come back after 10 years, these people are legally dead. So you got to fast forward. So this guy, Andres Toma, was a peasant from Hungary. He spoke one language only. He spoke Hungarian. And for those of you who know linguistics out there, you understand that Hungarian is a linguistic isolate in Eastern Europe. It's not a Slavic language. It's not even an Indo-European language. It's a Finno-Ugric language. It's related to Estonian and to Finnish, but it's not related to anything in Eastern Europe. It's very hard for people to understand. So, believe it or not, this guy he only understood Hungarian, and the Russians never really took an effort to talk to the dude with PTSD who only spoke what they thought were gibberish. These sort of uneducated, poorly educated orderlies and soldiers at a POW camp never really grasped that this guy they thought was speaking gibberish was speaking Hungarian.
Oh, I think I've
So,
heard of this story. Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
So, in the late 90s, there was a bilingual doctor from Slovakia who visited the POW camp. And he's looking at all these old guys that the Russians have said, well, we don't really know where this guy is from because he can't really tell us. I should back up. He
Okay.
did have identification on him. He did have identification on him, but at some point, it's really just not clear what happened. Hungary declared him legally dead in 1954. He's not coming back. He's not on the list of prisoners to be released. It's possible that, as happens, the Russians lost his identification, or what's more likely is the name was just spelled a little bit different, right? Andreas Toma, right? It's something that they could have put it as Toma Andreas. They could have spelled Andreas with the little accent mark or with an E. There's so many different things that could have happened, and it's kind of fuzzy, like what happened to his identification. But in any event, in the 1990s, the Slovakian doctor goes to this prisoner of war hospital, and it's like, you got a bunch of old guys here who are World War II veterans who, you say have bad PTSD and they can't even identify themselves. But he hears this guy muttering in Hungarian, and the guy speaks
Huh.
Hungarian, so he says to him, like, what are you doing here? And the guy's like, oh my God, finally someone's asking me. I mean, which is like just mind blowing, right? I mean,
Oh my God.
just mind blowing. So this guy rushes to Hungary, the doctor rushes to Hungary, and he says, hey, we think we've got a World War II veteran who's held in this mental hospital in Russia because people just don't know that he's Hungarian. And so the Hungarian government put out a bulletin, and 82 families stepped forward and said, we hope it's our relative. You just imagine, like, we started by talking about like the movie Rambo and how people here desperately wanted to believe that their relative was still being held in Southeast Asia and
Yeah.
might have a chance of coming home. Well, you think about this is in 1997, you're 50 years after World War II. People's brothers and sisters are in their 70s and 80s, their parents are dead, and 82 families came forward and said, we think this is our missing relative, right? So finally, they gave him a DNA test. And they found out that he still had his brothers and sisters that were
Oh
alive.
my God.
And this is Andres Toma. And he was released to his brothers and sisters and went back and lived with his sister Anna, who cared with him until he passed away until 2000. He was released in 2000. He lived until 2004. He had 4 years of
Oh
freedom,
God. God.
which is
Thank
so
God.
depressing.
Thank God he had 4 years.
4 years. But what's most fascinating, right, is that the Hungarian government said, well, technically this guy was never discharged. So he's been serving in the army for 60 years, and they gave him 60 years of back pay, which is really, really nice. It's probably the one thing that Hungary could do for him. Uh, Technically, he's also one of the longest serving soldiers on
Well,
record.
did they get it?
Yeah, he got his back pay. He
Oh, he
got
got the back
he
pay.
got he was technically serving for 56 years in the Hungarian army, so he got 56 years of back pay
Oh, good.
for serving in the Hungarian army because he had never been discharged.
Hmm.
Records that declared him legally dead were wrong, and the poor guy got 4 years of freedom. You think about how just cruel this must have been and the conditions that this must have been in.
Oh,
And
oh, yeah.
yeah,
I'm surprised he did not go insane. I'm surprised he was still
correct.
sane. The idea of sitting there and you're talking and no one can understand you, dude, that's a nightmare. That's hell. That is honestly a version of hell.
And by the way, I should say that he is studied not so much from military historians, but he's studied by linguistic historians quite a bit. What they're studying, I mean, and let's keep this in mind. Let's talk about all the gray factors that made this such a black and white case because it's always gray. This was a very poor, very uneducated guy. He probably was not literate. His ID was lost or his name was misspelled. On top of that, he had no knowledge of the outside world. He was born in some, village in Hungary in the mountains. He probably did not even know that people spoke other language. I mean, everybody kind of grasps that, right? But he probably didn't even grasp like that these people are speaking God knows what, right? On top of that, the people at the hospital just suffered from sort of a lack of care. It's like, oh, this guy's babbling. Who knows what he's speaking? And on top of that, he genuinely had a bad case of PTSD for many, many years. And maybe he really was just babbling and maybe there was nothing
Yeah,
intelligible.
true, true.
But the fact that this guy had nobody to talk to for 50, well, for the larger part of 56 years, and the fact that nobody talked to him, this is why linguistics want to study it. And they also want to study, like, how could it be that like people had such poor intellectual curiosity to ask, like, gee, what language is this guy speaking, right? And amazing too that he was held something close to solitary confinement, but like nobody ever went up to him and was like water, like trying to teach him words like you see the movies, like. And so it's just all of these things conspired to have this poor guy held for
Oh,
56 years, the longest held POW, released from World War II captivity in the year 2000.
just a perfect storm of hellishness. That
Yes.
is incredible. I have heard of a similar story, nothing like this though, nothing matches this. I heard of a similar story, or I read a similar story of when Rwanda was having their civil war between the
Tutsis and Hutus, yeah.
Hutus, that there was a Kenyan truck driver who was kind of going through the space, and one of the tribes captured him and just assumed he was from the other
Yeah,
tribe.
you look like you're
Yeah,
whatever. Yeah.
you look like you're a Tutsi. And so they held him in one of their camps, and they had, about 70 people there, 80 people. They would continue to bring people in, but every day they would bring one of them out and execute them in front of the cage that they kept all the people in. And this guy's like, he's trying to tell them, I'm Kenyan. But they don't speak his language, just like this guy. No one spoke his language. And so he's like, I'm gonna die. I'm not even part of this. Like, and they're gonna
Oh
kill
my
me.
God.
It just so happens that somebody who was like they had brought in to, like, I don't know, fix a stove or something, who was Kenyan, he came in and he heard the guy and he's like, "Hold it, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "I've been trying to tell them that I'm Kenyan." And he went
That's
to the
crazy.
folks and he said, "Hey, that he's like from my country." But anyway, it reminds me of that, right? Just and that was he was only held there for like a couple months. The idea of being held there for decades is just beyond me.
This is why I try to learn a few words of every language when I travel.
Help
Like, I mean,
me.
just being able to say "me born Los Angeles," like whatever language you're in, it's very
Yeah.
helpful.
Dude, great story. I did not know of that. If you know similar cases and you're watching this, hey, let us know in the comments because I'm curious what other stories. And of course, the saddest part of this, Mike, is how many times did that happen and no one ever found them, right?
Precisely. A lot of
Eh,
people must have died.
uh-huh.
And another theme. Last thing I'll say before we close is, before you think that your life is bad,
Oh
just
yeah.
think of stories like this poor guy.
Yep. And there's nothing new under the sun.
That's
Um, all right, Mike, it's been fun. Hey, like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Love doing this. I guess Mike, we'll see him next time.
See you next time.
Hey, if you like what you hear, like and subscribe. It really means a lot, and we would love to have you coming back every week. Thank you.